Evening guys, I just want to do a quick one. I've got another video uploading, but I uploaded that yesterday evening, but should be up tonight, like a little story from Barcelona. But I just want to go back and do a story from the real old days for me, from 40 years ago was the first time I was in prison, in one of them prisons, and this was the old regime, not the new regime like it is now. 40 years ago was completely different. One of those prisons was Rochester Borstal, or Youth Custody Centre, or Young Offender Institution, or Young Offender Prison, whatever you want to call it. It's all the same place. So first of all, when I arrived there, the first thing you notice when you come there is it's a really old, just after Victorian times jail. It even says Rochester Borstal 1908 on the front of the prison as you go in, by the entrance doors when you're going on the bus, where the wall is and that. But so it was built in 1908, just after Victorian times. It's the first Borstal, and the reason it was called Borstal Training is because Rochester Prison obviously is near the village of Borstal, and that was the first one. So yeah, I was there in the 80s, and I just want to tell you a little bit what that was like, because that's the closest I get to knowing what prison was like in the 60s, 70s, because obviously that's before my time, the 60s and 70s and the 50s, the old fella was away in the early 60s, late 50s possibly, but we don't really talk about that. But I do like watching some of the channels with the old stories. The best one I found is Liam Galvin's. He's got all the old prison stories on there. Albert Redding, Frankie Fraser, Roy Shaw. It's probably one of the best channels out there for that sort of stuff. Because a lot of those guys are dead now, R.I.P. So that's a really good channel. But back to my story, I just want to say, when I was in there, Rochester Borstal, opposite was a new women's prison that was built in the late 70s, I think. So it was more modern, and that was Cookham Wood. And at the time, the notorious evil sex murdering killer, Brady and Myra Hindley, was in there. And we used to get some gossip come over from the auxiliary screws or people on outside work parties about what was going on over there with her, and she was having affairs with female prison officers, female screws, that were lesbians and that, because she was a lesbian. And I'm glad she's dead. But, with someone like that, what would you have done if you'd ever bumped into her, if she had gotten out in the street? If she didn't die in prison and she was released like Lord Longford wanted her to be, and what would you do? You'd be so angry. You'd break all the rules about hitting a woman, wouldn't you? And you'd smash her in. But we don't want to talk about sex killers like her, really, do we? Myra Hindley and Rose West, who's still alive. But like I say, she was in there in Cookham Wood when I was in Rochester, 86. So yeah, I was just thinking about all this because, Bang Bang Ray, he does some old prison stories from the 60s and 70s, and he was talking on one of his videos about, getting your razor for shaving. And I remember when I first got there, you get your little bits and pieces off them because, they take your money off you. There's no shops. You go to the canteen once a week or whatever, and you can't buy razors from the canteen. And if you got no money, and what they give you, a screw comes round once a week, and he's got like this box thing strapped around his neck, like a bus conductor type thing, but it's a wooden box with all rows of holes in it, and each hole has a number on it, like 1 to 16, and a little enamel badge. And basically, when they come round to your cell, unlock you and give you this razor, and you had to, the first time they give you it, but the next week you had to give it back with the razor blade still intact inside the razor, and put it back with in the same hole with a number that they gave you, So luckily I was only a kid, so I only had a bit of bum fluff, so it didn't really bother me. But if you had a beard, you'd be in trouble. And with that, you got a little shaving stick, you know, a little white waxy shaving stick about 3 inches long, and a little glue brush, you know, with little hairs in it, and when you shaved with that, all the hairs come out, you know. And you got tooth powder, not toothpaste. It was in these little plastic tubs, and it's this bright green tooth powder, you know, and you'd use that if you didn't have the money to buy toothpaste from the canteen. Because I remember back then, the canteen, you got about £2 a week, and it was enough to get ½ ounce of Old Oban or Golden Virginia, and a packet of Prison Rizzlers and a box of matches or whatever. And you know, we used to break the razor blade out, the big razor, to split the matches. See how desperate we was for a light, you know. And yeah, like I say, if you didn't, once you'd use that tooth powder up, what a lot of us did, we kept the little empty cases, washed them out, these little plastic round cases with a lid on to keep the baccy fresh. We put our tobacco in there, you know. And if you was really skint, you could buy a 1/4 ounce of tobacco, or even an 1/8 of an ounce, you know, at the canteen. The auxiliary screw would cut the packet in half, you know, and you could buy ½ and 1/4 ounce of tobacco. I mean, about an 1/8 of an ounce of Golden Virginia, I'd try and make it last about 2 days, you know. And other things, you know, like splitting matches, or if you wanted a light, you couldn't call the screw. They wouldn't come to the door and give you a light, you know, like in the court cells. You'd have to rip a sheet up, you know, make a line, tear a bit of sheet off, chuck it down to the cell downstairs, and if they got a light, they wouldn't give you the lighter, they'd light the sheet, and you'd pull the line up and then use that bit of fire on the end of the bed sheet to light your roll up with, you know. But yeah, there was no sink in the cell. What you got a big plastic jug to fill up with water for a strip wash, which with one of them round bowls, you know. And you'd have to go out to the recess to get the water when you're unlocked in the morning and that for your wash. You got them silly little green towels, really small things, you know, because you wasn't allowed any of your own stuff. When I was in there, we still had to make bed packs. The screws used to come round in the morning going, hands off cocks, on with socks, come on, let's have you, and all that game, you know. And because it was Kent, Radio Invicta, that'd be playing out on the radio in the landing, because we wasn't allowed radios. I think you had to be doing over 3 or 4 to get a radio back then, you know. So yeah, it was all a bit different then, you know. But like I say, yeah, the tobacco, there was this stuff called Hilton, and we used to even have rhyming slang for it. We used to call it Peter Shilton. It was about £1 for an ounce, and it was the worst tobacco in the world. It was like the floor scrapings of the tobacco factory, you know, and they'd sell that off. It was just rotten, and if you smoked it, it made your breath smell like a dog's breath, you know. It's horrible, you know. Some people in there even used to smoke tea bags and all that game, but you know, never for me. That's just too extreme. I'd rather not smoke at all than do all that sort of stuff. But yeah, just a few little memories there about prison in the real world days. Like I say, back then there was no sink in the cell, no toilet, you know, like everything was all made out of the same plastic, the piss pot, you know, the jugs, you know. So yeah, and you got your little tea jug for your water, you know, as well, and your plastic mug. Everything was trays back then, big metal trays. You could buy tea bags and all that from the canteen, but there was no tea boats where they come around with bags of tea bags and all that like now, or a few years ago. Back then they used to come around with a tea in an urn before bang up at night, the last about 7 o'clock, and you got a cake with it or something, or a biscuit. And we used to call that tea diesel because it was so rough. It was like drinking bloody diesel fuel. But yeah, like I say, you could buy all your stuff from the canteen, but depending on whether you was convicted or remand, you know. But if you was convicted back then, you'd only be allowed like about a tenner a week or something to spend of your own money if you had it, you know. But back then I was only 16, and I got caught. I got nicked coming back from Holland, and they were shipping me all over the place back then, you know. But I can do that story about why I was deported from Holland in '86 and what happened here another time. But I'm going to leave it now and try and get this uploaded, because we're 10 minutes in already, and I've still got another 20-minute video uploading. So I'll get this uploaded, guys, and hopefully you'll see something tonight. Cheers.